Well, a good Sunday morning to all of you. Happy to see you on the last day of May, and feeling a little bit like summer. Last week we looked at dissent and assent, particularly in the church, and I suggested that I would continue that today, and we would take a look at some Bible passages and some wisdom from the secular world, from psychology and so on, to continue that topic of how we deal with dissent. I'd like to begin with a verse from Paul in his letter to the Galatians. This is in chapter 5:15. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. And then from the mouth of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, again staying in this vein, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. This is oft quoted. It was quoted often by dissenters in the Anabaptist Reformation, and is taken from Matthew 5:9. We all know it, are very familiar with blessed are the peacemakers. And another passage that I'd like to use foundationally today is from John 17, and it's Christ's prayer for his followers nearing the end of his life on earth. He's praying here. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I and them, and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. It's almost more than a prayer. It's almost a little bit of a sermon to his followers. If you do this in complete unity, that will be a witness to the world around about my love and the love of God shown through me. Well, I gave you a little story last Sunday, and I'm going to repeat the story. It's just a few sentences, and then we're going to look at a conclusion to the story. Again, it's fictitious, and the ending will be fictitious. It's a hard word. So here was the story. In a mostly Mennonite town near Swift Current, it's been traditional in the public school there to begin each day with a Bible reading and the Lord's Prayer. Times change. Some properties are sold to non-Mennonites. One is occupied by a family of Muslim refugees from Syria. Liberal-minded sponsors of the family of refugees protest the opening exercises during the public school day, taking their dissenting viewpoint to the school division office. The question, of course, resurfaces in the local Mennonite church, and we can imagine the discussions there because we've heard them many times. Motives are questioned, people are shunned, and the school division defers to the principal, who very much favors the status quo. If you maintain the status quo, no action is needed. Obviously, principals are overloaded already, as are the teachers in our schools. Well, I want to look at the outcome of this, because there are many ways in which there are many directions that this dissension could take. Here's what happened fictitiously. The pastor of the church called for a joint consultation on the issue with the Mennonite church leadership, the school board, and the leadership of the dissenting group. Sandra Kingdon, a trained conciliator in Herbert and not connected to any of the parties, is asked to moderate their meeting. She decides that the most important resource they might have for finding assent would need to be clear knowledge of all positions in detail, and she notified the groups that this would be required. The church council in the meeting, in its 15 minutes at the meeting, has a lot to say, but these are the main points that they make. They cite tradition. We've always done it that way. They've cited a deterioration of moral fiber in society and connected that to the lack of the Bible and prayer in schools. And they cite freedom of religion as the details of their stand on this subject. Very abbreviated here. The dissenting group, in its 15 minutes, argues that Canada is now a multicultural country, that public means public, and that ending the morning exercises does not preclude the church from religious or language teaching in the school as long as it's outside instructional hours. As long as it's outside instructional hours. The school board doesn't take their 15 minutes. They're indifferent on the issue, except that they wish not to have an extra burden placed on staff. That's understandable if they're already that busy. Kingdon then asks each group to come up with a plan that could hopefully satisfy both opinions, and declares a half-hour recess for all three parties to brainstorm separately on a way that might satisfy everyone. In effect, she's asking them to consider the other opinions beside their own. After further discussion, and that included in the total group, it's decided that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a catechism lunch could be held in one classroom conducted by the local church. Lunch for those not participating could be in another classroom, possibly with citizenship activities organized by the dissenters. The school board approves the arrangement tentatively if the parents represented will agree to set up and manage the program, and a committee is struck that includes both sides. Well, I think experience has taught us that too often, and especially where the dissenting opinion and the status quo opinion are more or less evenly split, competing camps can form, and the consideration becomes more a tug of war than a search for a solution. It's especially difficult when dissent presents via any of the following tactics. For instance, passive-aggressive conversation. People have said that we Mennonites, non-resistant people, have developed a second way of attacking, and that's called the passive-aggressive way, inflicting pain on others without actually overtly attacking. Ultimatums make the use of any process difficult. If the church doesn't do this, I'm going to the Anglicans. Aggressive language, which feels like bullets sometimes, or ad hominem arguments, that is, attacking individuals instead of the issues. Also, as we said last Sunday, pardon me, the formation of cliques of dissenters almost certainly moves a congregation away from yes and not toward it. In the Swift Current case, it would not have been unusual for the Bible-reading Lord's Prayer group to make this a debate about faith, putting the dissenters' sincerity in question. The dissenters, on the other hand, might also have formed a group, rented a bus, and taken both their school and church affiliations to the nearest neighbor town. A lose-lose outcome. But this factitious group got to yes, and I'd like to explore how that happened. Pardon me. It starts with those who have been authorized to lead. In the fictitious case, the pastor of the local Mennonite church exercised leadership and brought about the first step that should apply in any struggle toward yes. Leadership must show genuine concern for whatever the dissenters' opinions are, and must maintain a position of neutrality while leading. Too often churches neglect asking for outside help because they say, well, we ought to be able to deal with this ourselves. We are Christians after all. But I have yet to see a contentious meeting arrive at a happy outcome if it's moderated by a person, possibly pastor, council chair, a deacon or conference minister, who clearly is sympathetic to one side of the discussion. The moderator's task is to ensure that the positions are completely clear to everyone in the room, and that's not always easy. Too often we neglect the even-handed, quote, I know you see X differently than I do, but I'm going to listen without interruption while you take all the time you need to tell me why you believe what you do. To make this happen respectfully and objectively, the moderator must be focused on the process, not on the subject matter. Well, that's where getting to yes can begin. And I quote this again from Paul, for the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. That's a very meaty admonition from Paul. You won't be devoured by your enemies, but by each other. Wow. So the first priority of getting to yes in this scenario is an even-handed clarification of the issues under impartial guidance. Listening to understand, not listening to contradict. Second step might well be a round table about the justification for each position. Questions like this: what would be lost if morning exercises were to be totally secular? This would be asked of all groups. What would be gained if morning exercises were to be totally secular? What would be lost, and by whom, if a Christian component in the school day were to continue into the future? And what would be gained if it were to continue into the future, and by whom? What alternatives can we imagine that would bring children of the church to religious devotion and instruction in school without making second-class students of the other believers or non-believers? And possibly, what does the provincial law and municipal policy have to say that might be relevant? And even more importantly, what have other churches and schools and communities done that could be helpful to us? The second step, if successful, should do for the group what they're going to have to get used to in any case. It's the necessity of talking collegially once more across an apparent divide. Depending on how long tension has been allowed to build up, avoidance of persons and subjects may have become almost habitual. And it's almost impossible to retain a spirit of unity in the church without open and honest conversation. Well, there aren't many steps here. The third one that I've had suggested to me from different sources is the one that we often neglect to our peril. We like to put goal setting off to a future day, which may or may not ever come. It's almost as if some of us like theory and theology better than action. Step 1 and Step 2 have laid a foundation, but the proof of its value is shown in Step 3, which answers the question, given what we've learned today, what shall we do? Almost certainly we'll be talking about a compromise here. In the Swift Current case, a way was found to provide some religious instruction to Mennonite children during the school day without requiring the Muslim and other non-Mennonite children to sit in the hallway until opening exercises are over. Things would be different. Children who normally went home for lunch would need to pack a lunch on days that would be accompanied by a planned activity. Parents would have to prepare and administer the half hour designated by agreement to be an activity lunch. Well, I've always been a proponent of ending any consultation with some concrete commitment. Often this commitment would take the form of a spreadsheet, that is, a page with columns, and also with these things. In column 1, we would list the what we will do items. In column 2, we would answer the question tentatively, at what cost? And included in this is, how will it be paid for and from where? Column 3 would name the persons or committee designated to oversee the activity. Column 4 would answer the question, when? When do we start? When do we reevaluate what we've done? And the last column would be the scheduled evaluation of what was undertaken. Evaluation and feedback is always necessary if a community wants to continue to work together and to actually achieve things beyond just attending. Well, time and tide can change everything, and they can change the spreadsheet as well. But unless we set goals and are specific about what we do, we leave open the door to doing nothing. Well, here's another short story. I had resigned as moderator of Mennonite Church Saskatchewan. I guess that was in 2015, maybe. And although I'd warned him, a member of a dissenting group on gay membership took on the moderator's role. He's a good, generous, sincere person. I had nevertheless warned him that his strongly expressed views on the subject were well known and would make his tenure difficult. primarily because of the impartiality that's required to moderate. A meeting was called for First Mennonite Church in Saskatoon after he became moderator, a short while after. And the conference moderator chaired it. And many of us thought that that was a glaring error that could sink this submarine. I don't think anyone left there without having their stress over the subject heightened. The moderator gave a clinching speech at the end, laying out his view and the view of what had developed into a fairly substantial dissenting group. And as we left, a gay member of a Saskatoon church was told by another attendee, "You know what we do with sick animals on the farm? We shoot them." Well, I left, and a lot of others did too, I think, left that consultation day feeling I'd just swallowed a raw onion. The steps I've just outlined of dealing with dissension were certainly not followed in that case. But I've given you one blueprint for approaching a dissension in a church congregation, or in a community, or in an organization. It's pretty generic. But a blueprint like this, when dissension arises, is one thing, but there's more to this than following a useful order. We're all different, all human, all capable of rising to great heights or sinking to discouraging lows. But added to the process we've had suggested to us, maybe the following should be recommended as well. First, that group prayer be the symbol and the reminder of the unity of Christ, and that the dissension and the hope both be explicitly named in prayer, with all those involved on one side or the other present in the room. Secondly, time for us seems to be at a premium, not so much during the COVID-19 pandemic, but in the normal course of events. Long meetings can sap attention and commitment. We should never rush to a conclusion by taking a premature vote. Doc Schrader, that renowned and practical, down-to-earth instructor at CMBC in those days, used to advise not to reach a conclusion until the commitment to abide by it is unanimous. Let me repeat that in another way. When you're starting to debate an issue, you don't vote on it before you have decided that you will all accept the verdict. Break up the discussion into more shorter gatherings if that seems best. Sometimes we want to get it over. We want to get it off the table. But sometimes the dissension and the struggle to yes is so important that maybe it's a good idea to keep it going for weeks and months. Third, consider taking discussions of this tenor to a venue that is not where the discussion is at home, to a camp, or to another church that's unfamiliar to people. It can give the participants the opportunity to look at the subject more objectively than otherwise. Again, this is one of those practical things, and I'm a bit of a complainer, I guess, or dissenter maybe, about how we run our meetings. For instance, sometimes we run meetings with 8 of us seated along each side of a long, narrow table. which is totally impractical as a way of discussing something, because you can't see the expressions of people beside you or further down the line, and gesture and expression are very much a part of what we say. So around, or at least a square arrangement, so that you can pretty much see every face there well, is important. And in any discussions of the kind that we're talking about, in getting to yes after dissension, keep in mind that nobody should be in a position of inferiority in the setup of the room. 4. Keep in mind that every church, every individual most likely harbors some dissent. It might be about the music, or temperature, or the preaching, or kids running around, or janitorial standards, or whatever. It would be rare for any of us to think that what we're doing and where we're doing it is perfect, could not be improved. So we need to learn to accept differences of opinion as being normal, and apply the same principles to the small as to the large issues. Let me be clear why you're saying what you're saying. And then, what would you suggest as a change? And then, how would we make a change that would make it better? We need to work to understand the opinions, to talk seriously about possible change, and then make the changes, or not, depending how our discussion falls out. 5th and lastly, be aware that negotiation, conciliation, compromise don't always succeed. If everyone feels they've been heard patiently, that their opinion has been considered honestly, and they still need to separate, the goal should be to send them off with a blessing, and with the knowledge that they are always welcome to visit or to return. The recent dissension in Eigenheim, with people leaving to another place, certainly lacked this sense at the leaving. I'm going to end here with Jesus' prayer. I think it says more than I ever could about how important unity and striving toward yes is in the movement of which we're a part. John 17:22 and 23. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them, and you in me, so that they may be brought into complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. Amen and amen. That brings us to the end of our Sunday school year, as far as I'm concerned. I was thinking about this, and I have a bit of a bug about stories. Why do the kids always get the stories, and it's assumed that the adults don't need a story? As you know, I've written a lot of short stories, and I'm happy to share them at any time. I'm happier even if you buy the book and read the blog on which I place them occasionally. But I'm also interested in your life stories. I was very happy to see the video that had been prepared by Jill and Stuart. And I said to Agnes after, this is not really a children's story, this is a grown-up story. And to know the ins and outs of their lives, I think, is extremely useful to us as a unified church to know each other in more depth. So if the worship committee would like to put something into this slot, I would be happy to talk to them or participate in it. I could read you one of my award-winning stories, maybe even several over time. You have stories, you find them in magazines and so on, and something that really impresses you. It's not that hard to share it with everyone. Anyway, that will have to be approved or carried out in agreement without dissent if we're going to do that. I think this short time before the children's feature and the prayer time and the service itself is valuable. So let us all know what you think. Till then, have a great Sunday. Restful, invigorating, and alone in some cases, unfortunately.